So before we start the session, let me start with the raise of hands. Let me ask you how many of you are actually cord cutters, uh, not exposed to linear television? None of the people are responding. Anyways. Okay, so how many people in this room are cord cutters? Not exposed to linear television at all? Oh, so for this room, I'll say 50%. With that, let me start. Today's session is about video fundamentals, navigating the maze of video measurement matrix, which is all around AVOD, SVOD, TVOD. We have got expert panel. Our entire panel is divided into 5 broad subjects, which is about video landscape challenges and CTV and its impact on advertising, video measurement matrix and standardization, future trends and innovations. Let me begin with Bharvi. So Bharvi, we know that entire video landscape in today's time is very, very fragmented, right? We keep on talking about AVOD, SVOD. So a little bit for this room of what we understand about AVOD and SVOD and how are advertisers navigating this entire landscape? Could you just throw a light on this?
So primarily, it's obviously based on whether it's advertising-based video on demand or whether it's subscription-based video on demand, which gives people the benefit of being able to skip ads. But also they give you premium inventory, right? SVOD kind of helps you catch people watching appointment viewing shows or sports and live events. So how this helps, how advertisers navigate is one, what is the intended audience that you're looking for, right? So we always believe that chase the audience, not the medium. So for example, if your audience, you're a brand who wants to kind of reach out to a more massier audience, then of course AVOD is the best bet because it helps you reach out, it helps you scale, it helps you manage your advertising budget with other channels that you're pumping it in. SVOD helps you out if you want to reach the more premium customer, the more premium audience who are only available through certain kind of shows and genres, because beyond that, there is no way for you to target them. And that kind of gives you a more differentiated edge. You can be very specific about whom you want to communicate, what kind of communication. You can even tailor a different content, a different communication that you want to share with them. That is basically how AVOD and SVOD, brands I feel should ideally plan their strategy for.
Perfect. So Kshitij, when we are talking about this entire landscape, what are the challenges you typically face when you look at this entire environment, primarily on measurement on entire video as a medium? So what are the typical challenges which you see?
Right. So some of the challenges are probably, pervasive across other categories as well. It's not just related to just one category. And of course, video is coming on heavy for, digital marketers for the reasons rightly put by Bharvi. A couple of, issues that we have faced as digital marketers. One is, of course, the inconsistency in terms of reporting metrics, right? There are different platforms reporting different metrics. Everyone has their own way of, measuring how, video user behavior is being captured, right? Some people focus more on completed views, some people focus on exposure, some people focus on, interacted exposure and stuff like that. So there is no linearity or universality, for the lack of a better word, in terms of the metrics that we are chasing, right? There's not one single KPI that every single AVOD or SVOD will probably give me. That's one issue. Second is essentially, the attribution, of course. Every digital marketer in the room, that's their biggest nightmare, right? Attribution. And probably if attribution was sorted, right, these attribution companies would not have been in business. They would have died long ago, would not have been even born. So attribution is probably an issue because we have so many devices, right? I watch, let's say, NBA on Hotstar on my mobile phone. I'm watching, a cricket match on my laptop, and I'm watching something else on the CTV, right? So linearity in terms of what exactly is my behavior across these 3 devices, stitching that is kind of, it's not been solved for yet, right? And that's something that we grapple with every day. And it's also in terms of, as a performance marketer also, people are not able to attribute it to, a kind of a user behavior, which is giving birth to another, minor issue, which is called identity resolution. Right? How do I stitch my user who is going across 4 different video platforms and has had different behavior. Why? Which brings me to my first point. The way behavior is being measured is very different, right? It's very different across different platforms. So I think these are some of the, kind of industry pressing issues due to which, decision making probably goes for a toss. Which metric should I optimize on? Should I do it on a completed view? Should I do it on a completed exposure? Should I do it on an interacted, clicks? And what do I optimize on? That, is something probably that as digital marketers are kind of facing an issue.
Can I just add to that,
Yeah, yeah.
Sonny? So I completely agree with what you said. Like if we look at even what is the definition of a view, right? A video view, it differs so vastly across different video ad platforms. For some, it's a 3-second is considered as a view. For some, it's longer. And second, also know the ad placements. So the different placement options that you get for posting your video ad on different platforms is again different. So which means that not only does the success of your video ad depend on the content, it also depends on factors external to that. Where exactly is it being shown, in what format is it being shown as they navigate through the different platform. That is another aspect.
Correct. Just one thing I would like to add. So it's not just restricted to AVOD or SVOD platforms as well. Video as a medium, wherever it is being hosted, the definition of view varies. I'll give a very small example. A lot of enterprise customers are, investing heavily in video reach campaigns on LinkedIn, for example, right? But typically what I have seen speaking to people in the industry, for like a 40-second video, the average video completion time would be roughly around 17 seconds or so, without a definition of what exactly a view is, right? So that fundamental question is still not being answered across the board.
Could I add one more thing on
Yeah,
there?
absolutely. So Inderpreet is from Google. Anything, whatever advertisers are saying, right, the client side, he will have to counter it and give the validation, right?
Yeah, if you're locked out of your Gmail account, come talk to me as well. No, but I jokingly say this, but I obsessively focus on my publisher side, so I'm the only non-ads marketers person on the stage here. But I think one of the key things to talk to the point around identity resolution, where was this ad shown? Great point around where the context of the ad was shown is something our publishers and my publishers in the US and globally struggle with as well. And they want to be able to paint the journey of this user saw this ad at this point, but more importantly, what did they do before and after it? And what can they share with an advertiser and agency to say, this was whether it's an uplift in brand sentiment or they decided, hey, this was a bad ad, I'm going to actually just stop watching completely. Those are all key elements that our publishers are leaning into to say, okay, what can we do on our side to help tell that story for the advertiser and agency? So ultimately, selfishly for a publisher, they want to be able to prove to you guys, this is a great place for you to put your ad money towards, right? So it's something that publishers struggle with today, but I think that a lot of our publishers are leaning in heavily into saying, okay, given that there are no standards, given that devices are fragmented, I love your example of, you're watching one piece of content on your phone and on your CTV, on your big screen. Sometimes you're doing it all at once. You're scrolling and watching at the same time. How do you link all that stuff together? And that's really where the industry needs to come in and talk through what really matters, right? What is the engaged view, what is not? And then having metrics that can talk to that and link all that stuff together.
Perfect. I think you mentioned very important point. I'm also led to think whenever we talk about digital, we invariably lead everything to performance, right? We connect everything to performance. And since we are talking about video as a landscape, and sooner or later I'll come to that point, ultimately we are talking about video as a landscape, right? And the way the consumer ecosystem has evolved, and therefore people have shifted to your AVOD, SVOD, OTT, CTV, right? We tend to demand a lot from platform, if I honestly ask you, right? And that brings me to my second question. How are we evaluating, or how are you as an advertiser evaluating balancing between your linear television and your CTV, right? So because there is only a fixed way of reporting in your linear television, while there is so much metric which is being given in CTV, yet we tend to demand more. So how are you balancing this entire space? So what's your approach when you are,
So I'll take video in its entirety. I'll also
Right.
include, social platforms and any other video-based advertising platform. So one is, like you rightly said, we do ask for a lot because we do want to also justify the marketing budget that we kind of put in. But having said that, I think it's also very necessary to understand what that medium can do for you and be realistic about the metrics that you should be measuring. So for example, not every video advertising platform has reached the maturity level of where you can evaluate it against a performance metric. So if your goal is to be discoverable as a brand, if you just want to reach out and be in that, the top funnel where you want people to know about your brand, create that interest in your brand, create that demand, then yes, all these kind of bigger screens and whether it's TV or even CTV to a large extent, they come into play, and there you get your bang for a buck because you have a bigger screen, you can do a better storytelling, right? The reason we all watch content more on CTV is because it's more immersive. You kind of get that entertaining factor when you're, watching something and unwinding. So that gives you the benefit of actually now making even better ads, making even better video content and entertaining them. But that is if you are clear that it's more from a brand discovery and awareness or consideration building perspective. If you're diving into performance, then what we do is we stick to those platforms which we know are built now, have reached that evolution model where you can optimize them for performance-based results and thereby, leverage it for that. Because they've come a long way, so it's best to know what platform to use for what goal.
So,
do you want to add? Yeah.
I would like to double click on what exactly Bhairavi said, right? So fundamentally, how do we differentiate between AVOD and SVOD when, as an advertiser or as a brand, we would want to put our money there? So AVOD is clearly, reach, frequency, probably grab more eyeballs with the relevant audience. So relevance is the key takeaway for all of us whenever we are choosing the platform, right? Let's say if there is a kind of a brand like, let's say a chauffeur, right, in Bangalore. It's a cab service, right? It probably is, bordering on the lines of indulgence of sorts, and someone who's ready to pay for a convenience. So you would probably, try to find a balance between the platform that you're choosing is something that is all, kind of matching in terms of brand sentiment there, right? So AVOD obviously gives you top of the line metrics and all of that. SVOD is more like an impact property in terms of video, right? Of course, people who have, subscription based, experiences are probably going to go the extra mile. And obviously you will evaluate that platform in that sense only. You will not hold it for performance, right? Similarly, like for example, if you want to probably, let's say, evaluate, let's say a Spotify versus something else in terms of completed views or in terms of engaged views, you'll be very clear the KPI I'm chasing, right? And that's how you basically put your money on. And I think this clarity probably has come only recently to, digital marketers because, the platforms have been mushrooming, and like how. And I think it's kind of made our job easier because obviously there is some, sensibility of measurability around there. And secondly, the kind of content available, does have some types of context that probably it, relies on, right? So I think that has kind of made our job a little bit easier, I would say.
One thing, there was a point you made in your first statement about you're following where the audience is, right? And I kind of put myself in the audience bucket of I'm a hybrid TV watcher where I still have you asked about the cord cutting, right? I kind of put my hand up because I have pretty much every streaming service under the sun based in the US. And I also have a cable subscription with 250 odd channels and live sports and everything like that. I am an audience that is going across all of those things. Plus, I listen to a lot of podcasts. I watch a lot of YouTube. I browse the open web. I play on mobile apps. Like, it's the whole linear TV, CTV debate, if you would say. I don't think it's a zero-sum game. I think, unfortunately, for the buyers, you kind of have to increase your budgets to reach me and also my family and people who are cord nevers and cord cutters. And I honestly think it looks at, to your point as well, around what is that individual medium doing for you as a buyer, right? And the publishers think the same way. And a lot of times what we're seeing in the US is the two houses of a broadcaster coming together, the linear team, the traditional TV team, and the CTV streaming team. Yeah, they probably still execute separately on different processes, different technology, but when they go sell in the upfronts and capture those big brands in the upfronts, they're going as one. And they're saying, agency, buyer, however you want to transact with us, this is the audience and this is where you will find them. Here's the data to help prove that you're reaching that user, and here's the data that we can show the appropriate uplift based off of the KPIs that you care about. So I keep thinking about what you said about the audience, like you follow the audience and you grow your budgets, or maybe you shrink your budgets based off of what is the audience that you care about the most. And obviously that'll change by the specific brand, the campaign, everything like that. And then from a publisher side, and when I'm consulting with them about how to best set things up, they're trying to be as flexible as possible because they know they're going to have different audiences that do different things across their streaming platform, across content that they distribute through, I think a lot of people know free ad-supported streaming TV or FAST, and then also over linear as well. This content isn't getting cheaper to produce, and the audience is growing by the day, so all of our publishers are being much more flexible when it comes to giving advertisers optionality of where to reach these consumers.
Yeah, okay.
Very fair point. Now that you mentioned about audiences, when we are planning in our respective ecosystem of different brands, we don't think of digital or television. That's not how we typically think. We think of audiences. And typically, in all our large clientele, the way has been TV plus. Because of the advent of CTV and your entire AVOD and SVOD, has the entire approach in your respective organizations changed? How you have started to plan? Do you approach CTV first and then go to television because of NCCS A, B? So how do you approach it? Has it changed?
It definitely has changed. So typically, I'll also tell you how we decide where to which platform is much better. So at our experience centers and at some of our key dealer points, we do conduct annual surveys of consumers who walk in the store. We understand their media consumption habit, the kind of programming they watch. Is it news? If it is news, do they watch it on CTV? Do they watch it on TV? So that's how, we kind of found out some interesting things. So while there's a lot of content that they watch on CTV, most of them seem to consume news on TV, on linear TV. Is what I mean to say. So, that is where you kind of get to understand where it is that you need to kind of reach out to the audience, which platform. The other thing is, where are you probably going to get a better captive audience? So if there are maybe two platforms and you're not sure which one to kind of plow your marketing money on, you could do an A/B testing, or you could also figure, what, people who watch this show or people who watch this sporting event tend to be more, better captive audience, and the chance of them noticing my brand is higher. So that is the direction I will go. So those are some of the things that you kind of keep learning as you keep trying more things. So yeah, that's how to do it.
So Kshitij, same for you, right? Now you come from Indigo ecosystem. And you recently have forayed into this entire hotel business, which we were chatting about, which is largely about premium inventory, premium customers, right, who are going abroad. So then how has your entire ecosystem started to look at CTV and?
No, absolutely. It's kind of, bearing some, I think, insights from what Bhairavi mentioned. See, the fundamentals remain the same. Of course, we're going after where the audience is. But we are probably, keeping in mind that a certain channel is probably designed for impact, right? And by the nature of being present in homes where we can probably, study the NCCS data, or maybe we can see, the purchase power in terms of a certain metric, right? The choice of channel in terms of deciding the impact property has probably, kind of been an integral, point for us while choosing the media, right? For example, we recently, we came out with a business class product called Indigo Stretch, right? And, when we were kind of brainstorming about, the kind of media buying we would like to do, of course, we thought about the audience was, where do we find such audience? And how exactly you are trying to kind of, deliver maximum impact with the right audience. And, we are not chasing vanity metrics there. It's all about measuring, impact that is available in that ecosystem. So that's the fundamental thing that we think of. And of course, secondly, when I talked about context, right? Whenever we are evaluating any channel across, any ecosystem like a CTV or like a live TV or something else, the context plays a bigger role, right? You will see a huge difference in terms of, your ad performance running on a Wimbledon, right? Versus, let's say, a cricket audience. World of difference, right? In terms of, your exposures, your completed views, and your interactivity will be very different. So that's the fundamental thought that we have probably, brought to our media buying in terms of understanding that what KPI am I chasing or what audience am I going after, and what medium will probably make more sense for me. Because, ultimately, the bottom line is same, right? When it is aviation, when it is categories where there are people investing in experiences, right? That collinearity has to match. Yeah.
Now, Inderpreet, I'll address this question to you. It's about the entire impact on advertising. You know that Google has been at the forefront of developing all tech possible for us to measure a lot of things. So the way CTV is growing, and we know that there are a lot of lacunas in this area, right? For example, when it comes to mobile, you still have the ability for different vendors to pass on their device IDs, right? CTV, through your DV360 serving, it was still a very, very difficult proposition, at least in India, right? For us to unify all the audiences and see in one particular light. Secondly, these are two different ecosystems. One is mobile, one is CTV. Ultimately, you target through one single environment for you to see the one view of your consumer, which is still a gap. So where does Google stand on this? How are things developing in this entire area? What are the things which are yet to come, which we can see for us to measure it effectively?
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point around the analogy of mobile app and the evolution it had to go through. I've been talking to a few people here today about CTV is where mobile app was, like 12-ish years ago? You had so many different operating systems, devices, the smartphones with maybe the quote-unquote feature phone with some web capabilities. I still remember the days of when taking a 728 by 90 and shrinking it down to fit into a WAP page, right? And like, what was the measurement for that? And eventually the industry coalesced around a couple of device IDs, and the key feature being fully resettable and user controllable, which has been foundational for everything Google does, right? Give the user the control and the choice and the insight to make the most informed choice for themselves. And that's helped, obviously, users get access to a lot more content, a lot more apps, gaming, things that entertain us and educate us and inform us. And now CTV is having that mobile apps moment, right? But it's happening in a medium which is hard to experiment in, right? When you think about the type of high quality content that television is you expect for television to give, to translate that to CTV, it's a very, very high bar, right? Mobile app created an ecosystem. CTV is helping an existing ecosystem go into this new generation, right? And when you talk about device IDs and all those things, so much of it, even as from a Google Ad Manager perspective, we are a recipient of what the platforms, i.e. the devices, will give, right? Whether it's a Roku device, an LG device, Amazon Fire, et cetera, they are all using their own version of a device ID, and it's resettable to some extent in certain devices. And for us as a platform, we're saying, come up with some standards. That way we can make it easier for a publisher to do things like frequency capping, competitive separate, making sure that they can provide a quality of experience, and then whatever additional data that they have, pass it on to the advertiser so you guys can do the appropriate type of measurement, creative rotation, insights into the user, and all those different things. So from a Google perspective, an ad manager perspective, we're working with the industry to say, okay, what are the pieces of data that actually matter? And to the point, I think it was earlier made about context, we're firm believers around a lot of what made TV great, which was content as a proxy for audience. So there are certain types of content that resonate with certain demographics more than they do others, right? So how can you pull that kind of information in a CTV environment? So when you're putting genre, rating, the actors or actresses that are in here, time of day, all these things, it's helping bring in a way of buying that traditional TV advertisers understand. They understand that, you know, the GRP-based way of reaching a consumer. And then you're getting digital buyers who pretty much were performance first, right? Getting into, oh, actually, I can go in and do brand campaigns as well. I give this a key example. While watching the Super Bowl, I actually saw a direct-to-consumer brand actually spending $8 million for a 60-second ad on the Super Bowl. I'm like, I've never seen them. I've seen them in my social feed. I've seen them on YouTube videos. I've seen them with pre-rolls and all that. I've never seen them do brand, right? But they see that it's not just about like, oh, I need this device ID to get access to this inventory. There are other pieces of data that can help me reach this new consumer, and it doesn't have to necessarily be a device ID.
I really, resonate with the point where you said that content acts as a proxy for context and the audience, right? The biggest example we have in India, if you want to target parents, you run ads on Cocomelon channel, right?
Exactly.
Because that's a good example of, cross-channel attribution and viewability behavior is probably not that granular, right? If somebody is watching Cocomelon videos for 7 hours a day, certainly you need to understand that, something is off. You cannot marry that to other behaviors, right? So I think that probably runs across geographies.
Oh yeah, and you think of content, a producer, they typically make content for everybody, but there's also a certain, the director or the creator had an audience in mind when they created that piece of content. So you can stereotype things, but there are certain types of content that will resonate with certain demographics because that's what the creator intended. And then you can utilize that for whatever type of personalization you want to do.
And I think that gave birth to probably what recently came on board, right? Video commerce, right?
Yes.
The Netflix and Google handshake. Thanks to Emily in Paris, and Mitra jumped on board, and Google was there, obviously, right? Of course, it's going to be the next big thing. But I think you guys probably preempt what users are going to do before anyone else does.
On the measurement, I think Google has done pretty well in terms of bringing in DCR, right? Your ADS solutioning.
Right.
But I think you are in a better position to tell us that how many are takers out there, right? So for ADH as a measurement methodology, because that requires some bit of investment, some tech integrations and all. And it can give you your media data, people can bring in their business data and sort of marry it. But what's your take on this? What is the take, global and as well as when you compare it to the benchmark in India? So
I think one of the key things is that from a publisher perspective, we're all about enabling them to bring what makes them unique about the data that they have access to, because they have a relationship with the consumer, right? Whether they are the CTV platform that is physically in the home, or the cable box, or the streaming stick, or the app that a consumer decided to subscribe to and give billing information, all these different things. We're enabling things to allow the publisher to take their data and also combine it with the advertiser data, because I think that both sides can be true where each group has a relationship with the consumer, whether a direct or indirect relationship. So if as a platform on the publisher side, we want to help create those connections between the two. Now, you mentioned Ads Data Hub. That's the DV360 and buy-side way of helping advertisers take their data and combine it in a clean room environment. And we need something on the sell side, on the publisher side, to do that. And that's the things that we're building out as well, because just doing one in a silo is not going to help reach both sides' needs around personalization and reach and ad efficacy and all these things. So I like to attribute all, especially in CTV, it's, to use a Western term, it's the Wild West, right? Everyone's still figuring it out. They who's the sheriff, who's the bad guy, and ultimately you have a bunch of people stuck in the middle. And that's one of the things that we're trying to do with the ecosystem, not just on the publisher side, but working with agencies to understand how are they adjusting their approach into this space, and what data do they want to bring versus what do they want to rely on the publisher to bring to the table too.
Bharvi and Kshitij, while Google does what it does, right? And therefore, we all have I have my job.
Remember, I'm only on the Google Ad Manager side, not everything else.
but there are multiple measurement available out there, right? So apart from their publishers' own validation of how your ads have worked across platforms, do you as a brand actually go back to Nielsen or some other solutioning for the third-party measurement? How is that space evolving? And what are your go-to third-party measurement solutioning?
So some of the platforms, that's a very valid point because yeah, apart from getting platform metrics, you also want to know beyond that, right? What do these metrics actually add up for me? I mean, you can get, this is the view through rate, you know how engaging your content is and all that stuff. But what is that actually translated from what people have understood about the brand? So we do a lot of brand lift studies when it is on those kind of platforms. And apart from that, you also have now certain OTT platforms who also do a third party, say via Kantar, they do a brand track study to kind of figure out what is the assessment of the brand. Have you changed the needle in the perception? Have you now fallen in the consideration set of the customer when it comes to making a purchase? So these kind of studies are definitely important because, metrics like how many impressions you had, how many people you could reach, that's all great. But what does that actually translate into is definitely needed. In fact, I would wish that every platform integrates these kind of metrics, these kind of independent studies into their measurement criteria or in the reporting that they offer to brands. One, because see, it also helps. I mean, if your platform is good, you know that it's also going to help brands build a case study internally to kind of come back to your platform more. And once more brands and more advertisers like us get to know that certain platform is offering some additional reporting and analysis metric, we are also going to want to have a piece of that, right? Because it's easier to correlate your assumption of what your ad is doing on that platform to what it is actually delivering. So yeah, it makes a lot of difference.
No, absolutely. What Bhairavi said, like in terms of brand, obviously we rely on those, brand lift studies. But if a platform is giving us kind of an icing on the cake of sorts, we would definitely jump on it. Spotify, for example, of course, they are, IAS and double verify and all of those things to understand the brand safety element, right? It's very important because that establishes trust. Like you said, CTV is kind of wild, wild west right now, and people probably, are dipping their toes and still probably are not neck deep in waters to understand what exactly is happening. So, from a brand safety standpoint, at least we rely on IAS and other kinds of, players to understand, the veracity of the data being reported, because that's the biggest, I think probably takeaway. Yeah, that's when rubber meets the road kind of thing, right?
One thing I'll also mention on that front is that when it comes to like streaming and CTV, like you mentioned, they're dipping, a lot of partners and publishers are dipping their toes. They're really utilizing things like programmatic guaranteed as a way of utilizing programmatic pipes to execute something and then learn from it, right? And they can bring whatever trusted third-party measurement that they want. You see in the US, Nielsen said, hey, we're getting rid of our panels. We're going full impression-based and with our Nielsen One product. And then you have the folks like iSpot, who's the chosen vendor for NBC Universal, but then you also have contextual metadata providers like Iris and Samba and Anoki and a whole bunch of other folks who are coming into this and saying, no, we also have data that can be useful for personalization and measurement, and you have to be able to execute it in a trusted environment. And the third-party verification piece is interesting because I think you could have like 5 separate companies measure one thing and get 6 separate results. And it's just, and that has to be okay for the time being until, again, standards come to bear that both publishers and advertisers agree upon. Like, we know what an impression is, and we have rating, we have groups that say this is officially an impression, and we validate it, the platform measures it in the right way. But what about context? What about sentiment, emotional sentiment? What about brand lift, and like you said, search lift, social search lift, all these different things. And that is going to be a complicated space, but that's why we have such great companies in there to try and help the brand out, help with VO agencies, and then also bringing in the publishers who can bring in a layer. So I don't think complexity is a bad thing as long as you have the right people working in on it. And that's from a platform and Google Ad Manager perspective, that's what we firmly believe as well.
With that, our conversation will never end if we do not bring AI into picture, right? Now, every sentence has to have machine learning and AI. I read a couple of years back that Google, out of all the AI scientists in the world, 51% has been employed by Google, right, to do some wonderful job. With that, how are we advancing when it comes to measurement, development on CTV, when it comes to AI and machine learning? New things to come, betas to come?
Yeah, for us, AI, it was machine learning before AI was cool, right? So it was always machine learning built into all of our products on the advertiser and just as importantly, on the publisher side. And it may not sound super alluring or anything, but I think a lot of what the AI innovations are going to be is around measurement. Is really going to be quality of experience, quality of service types of metrics, especially when you think of live streaming. I think that's the next untapped frontier for not just programmatic, but for streaming, is how do you ensure that you are able to find issues before, or find smoke before there's fire, right? So how do you use AI and rely on tools that help you find out, oh, error rates are spiking up in this specific region. Is there a problem with the CDN? Is there something wrong with my creative that I'm getting from the agency? Things that have a material impact to revenue and also brand perception of a person experiencing an issue while watching live content. Because I'm maybe not being the minority here, but whenever I had an experience streaming something and it was an ad that it hung up on, I tend to remember that bad ad experience versus all the great good ad experiences. And that's a very challenging environment to be in. So you want to use AI to be able to find those issues before they happen. But then there's going to be so many things around creative renditions that you can think of around. I think there was we did a presentation, one of my Google colleagues talking about how do you can utilize AI to create customized experiences for the user, for the household, for the region. How do you localize things? Like, those are unsung things that create such a quality experience. And it all ties into measurement in terms of being able to take all these vast sets of data and make sense of it. So as like an agency, an advertiser, you'll have to deal with probably 20 separate digital sets of data to make sense of one campaign, right? It's hard for a single person or a group of people to do, even with the best data scientists. You need those tools in AI to actually help out with that. So it doesn't sound so, you use the word like alluring here, but it's those kind of keep behind the scene things that just make the process of monetizing CTV, growing it, and ultimately creating the best user experience. That's where the AI piece is going to come into play for me.
See, I probably don't know the extent to which AI has been deployed in terms of behavioral measurements and stuff like that. But I think probably, basis what you said, there is probably room for intent there. Like, for example, let's just take a hypothetical example. Brand watch becomes a socially accepted metric or a currency that probably gives you a sentiment around the content, let's say to an OTT player, right? Now that becomes another kind of a layer or a KPI on which your campaigns can be built, right? That probably could be an area where probably, what we were trying to achieve is kind of socially accepted by the industry as well. And of course, there's a lot of value that it brings to the table. Yeah?
I think we have crossed our quota of time. But I would request each one of you to give one advice to the advertisers who are sitting out there when it comes to CTV, with your own experiences, CTV and AVOD and SVOD, your experiences. One line to sum it up.
I would just say that make your content, be fitting the medium. So if you're looking for a large screen, entertaining, immersive, you're going to get that captive audience, then take the effort to design a content that is suited to that medium. Otherwise, you're just wasting marketing dollars just using the same repeated content that you're creating for very short attention span consumers on different platforms.
I would just say do your research well before you choose the channel or the medium, because there is a kind of an, tacit agreement between the consumer and the type of content they're consuming, right? The channel or the medium on which the brand is being advertised, people, indirectly associate it with the brand, right? For example, let's say a Rolex would be seen in probably something like a Vogue or something, right? There's a perception, right? So just pay attention to that perception. It's very important. I think that would be my only submission.
I would say don't be afraid of programmatic. Utilize it as an experimentation channel, especially as you're making the expansion from traditional television to streaming. programmatic is a great way of finding those new audiences, to go back to this central point, that you may not have thought about. And it's a great way of building direct connections with those publishers that you may not have engaged with in the previous time. So utilize the technology to experiment, to learn, to discover, and to find new ways of finding that new audience and working with really great publishers that you weren't able to engage with before.
Thank you. Thank you for the insightful session. Bharvi, Shridhar, and Inderpreet.
Thanks a lot, Santosh. Very well moderated. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much to all of our speakers. And if I could request you to please step forward for a quick group photograph. And while we come to a very insightful closure of the day one of AdTech 2025, we of course come back tomorrow.